We can write a new money story. We can develop a new relationship with money. And it can become fulfilling and empowering and fun for women, to the point where we feel happier, better in terms of our overall financial wellness.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 525 with guest Keisha Blair. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. We are gathered today to have a conversation with another amazing guest. I'm so excited for you to meet her. Before we jump into that, just a quick announcement that I have 1 spot left this spring/summer for private coaching. Just a couple examples of what some people are bringing over the last few months. I have someone who is getting back into the dating game after a while and wants to succeed in her goals of being less anxious, setting better boundaries, having hard conversations sooner rather than later. I have someone else who's in a career transition and just got the job of her dreams, which was one of those like moonshot things, but it happened. And then another person has come to me because she is wanting to ask for more at her job. And again, it's about having those hard conversations, setting bigger goals, and having some accountability around it. So if you're in any of those places or you're in some kind of transition, something that you want to do that you just haven't done yet and can use some guidance, some coaching, some accountability, send me an email and we'll see if it's a good fit. You can go over to andreaowen.com/coaching, fill out an application, and we will take it from there. All right. You ready to hear about today's guest? Keisha Blair is on the show. We're talking about money, one of my favorite topics ever. And I think that we just cannot hear enough from professionals around this topic. And so I've brought you another one. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Keisha Blair is the award-winning international bestselling author of Holistic Wealth Expanded and Updated, 36 life lessons to help you recover from disruption, find your life purpose, and achieve financial freedom. Keisha Blair has been profiled in the New York Times, Real Simple Magazine, Forbes, the Harvard Business Review, Essence Magazine, and many other publications. Her viral article, My Husband Died at Age 34, Here Are 40 Life Lessons I Learned From It, was viewed by more than 50 million people globally. Keisha Blair is also the host of the Holistic Wealth podcast. So without further ado, here is Keisha. Keisha, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
I am too. I think this is the earliest and it's only like 9:15 in the morning that we're recording this, but I have a puppy and she goes to doggy daycare on Tuesdays, only once a week. So I batch a bunch of episodes. So you're my first one this morning. So I feel like I'm coming in on 2 wheels and we're going to talk about kind of a big topic, and that is money.
Yes.
Okay. And I love what you call it. You call it holistic wealth. So let's start there from the very beginning. What is holistic wealth and why is it so important to women in today's world?
It's such a great topic. And, it's so funny because I coined the term holistic wealth with the first edition of the book in 2019. So it was published in November 2019. It's unbelievable how it's kind of revolutionized the way so many women see money and think about their overall wealth. And so holistic wealth basically has, several pillars. And so one of the first ones is, as you can imagine, the financial piece, which is basically, financial savvy and independence. And it also encompasses, spiritual well-being and a life purpose and mission, as well as your mental, emotional, and physical health, as you can imagine. And so all of that, gives us added resilience during times of difficulty, during times of tragedy, and even setbacks. And even if it's a minor setback, even if you haven't had a big setback, it really does strengthen our resilience muscles when we think about our wealth as not just about our money, right? Like yesterday, I took a walk after, feeding the kids and having, a busy day with work and everything. And we just took a walk in nature. And I thought, wow, this is really adding to my holistic wealth. I'm feeling so much more happier and wealthier for it. And it's such a good term, a wholesome term to think about wealth around us and how we appreciate it and the gratitude that we have for the things around us. So it's just revolutionary in that way, and it goes beyond money. And women want to redefine how they see themselves. Like traditionally, we think of wealth in terms of our net worth and our assets alone, and kind of our salary and our titles and all of that stuff. And while it's good to earn and become financially independent, as I mentioned, it's also good to recognize, especially during COVID, especially during what we've been through, how important our mental health is, and our physical health. Like everybody knows, like all of us, we're faced with our mortality. And so that's what it comprises. So it's really revolutionary in the way we think about wealth.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Well, I want to circle back to something that you said that sort of struck me when you answered that very first question, and you talked about a life purpose. Can you kind of zoom in on that and talk a little bit about why having a life or how having a life purpose rather would be helpful to someone who struggles with their financial health?
Absolutely. And so even in the book, the first section is called Build Your Life Purpose Portfolio. And it's there right front and center because it's so important, especially for our finances, to have that life purpose, because so many of us kind of teeter throughout life. We go with the wind in whatever direction we're blown. We get influenced by others. We think one path is destined for us. And when you embrace that life purpose, it really gives you that center and that meaning, so that you spend and invest differently. You spend and invest according to this life purpose and to this mission that you've embraced, your personal mission, whatever that is. And so it gives your money purpose too. So many people have struggled with money trauma in the past, and they struggle with their financial identities. And so many of us, right? Like we transition into adulthood, not even having a sense of our financial identity. And so embracing that life purpose also helps us with all of those issues and helps us to ground our finances in this purpose and this mission. And so there's purposeful spending, and there's spending that makes us more resilient. I always talk about this term, financial resilience. It gives direction to the money, and it gives the money that much more energy. So it's a pretty important concept as it relates to our finances.
So I have other questions for you, but now every time you're talking, I'm like, I'm curious about that. And I'm curious about that. So I'm assuming that a money identity is very similar to your life purpose, or are they two very separate things?
Yeah, so they're two separate things. So what happened is I developed this financial identities framework because I realized, like, even as a trained economist, I, sometimes as a woman, like I would doubt myself, and I would think, why, is it that, and this was especially after my husband died, and I was widowed at an early age at 31. And that was, now I'm remarried. That was years ago. But back then I thought, why is it that when I spend, I'm thinking about how he would have spent? And then I came up with this framework, and, it's the personal financial identity framework, and it really grounds us in terms of our financial identity. So the quiz is available on the Institute on Holistic Wealth website for those who want to take it. But really, it really gives us that financial identity, and you're able to pinpoint the advantages and disadvantages of your personal financial identity. And it helps you in crafting your personal money story. And your personal money story evolves over time, right? As we become more aware, as we begin to advocate for ourselves, where our finances, are concerned. And so it's tied to the life purpose, because then once you identify your financial identity, you're able to say, okay, with this identity, how can I use my financial identity, especially the strengths of it? Because now I'm aware of the strengths and the weaknesses. How can I use it to really advance my mission and to implement my mission in a very authentic way, so that I'm not following the crowd. I'm not spending, based on how my friends are spending. I'm spending in an authentic way that drives my mission. And so that's why it's so very good for all of us to be self-aware, undertake these things and really drive that purpose forward, knowing what we're prone to and knowing our personal identities.
Probably like many people listening, not everybody, but some of you, I can just, and of course we'll have those links in the show notes to your quiz. Mm-hmm. My hunch is that my identity growing up was that someone would always take care of me financially. And also that I'm not smart enough to be able to take care of myself financially. Mm-hmm. And that'll find you in debt by the time you're in your late 20s. I know from experience. And also that debt is just this like weird kind of like esoteric thing out, like this mystery cloud, like the cloud. It's like the cloud. Mm-hmm. It's just like exists, but no one can really see it. And that's not how that works. I had a rude awakening about my financial identity about, 15 years ago. And had to climb my way out of that. But I'm curious, you mentioned that you were widowed at a young age. So is that what brought you onto this journey on your own holistic wealth journey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was definitely the impetus for that. Because you know what? I realized, Andrea, like when I had that big life-changing setback, I realized that if women continue to define themselves by the traditional notions of wealth and success, we would find it much more harder to bounce back from a life-altering setback. Because then you think about, oh my gosh, as you mentioned, the debt, or you think about, oh, I've had to give up this job and give up this title, give up this position because of this setback, regardless of whether it's a divorce, illness, what have you. And I realized that if we think about holistic wealth, we think about defining ourselves as being holistically wealthy in terms of these different facets of life. And if we were to be intentional about, crafting this on a day-to-day basis and thinking, well, you know what? I feel so much more wealthier or holistically wealthier because my mental health is intact and my emotional health is intact. I'm taking care of me. I'm prioritizing my self-care. Then how much more resilient could we be? And so that's why I came up with this framework, because I realized that in defining ourselves just by that traditional notion of wealth, that could be disastrous. And especially when we go through these setbacks. And so I had written an article that went viral, in 2017, and it's entitled, "My Husband Died, Here Are 40 Life Lessons I Learned from It." And that formed the basis for the first edition of the book, because it touched so many lives and so many people reached out to me, so that we decided to just expand it in a book. So absolutely, that's how this whole concept, that's how the journey started, because of that realization. And even as a trained economist who had worked at at the highest levels, I realized that this is something that we need to build our resilience to be able to overcome setbacks.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. I mean, no one prepares for that, right? I mean, I think very few people think they're going to be widowed in their 30s at such a young age. And what a difficult way to learn those lessons. My gosh, just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, it's so funny because, even though the article was crafted as these are the lessons I learned, like some of them I had learned way in advance of him dying. Like, for instance, the financial aspects of it. As I said, like as a trained economist, he was an accountant, he was a CPA, and we had planned for all of that eventuality. And so it was kind of me passing the baton on to other women about how you can plan ahead, because financial independence for me went way back before marriage. Like it stemmed from me being an only child and growing up as an only child and with a realization that I needed to be financially independent just in case something happened to my parents. And at the time when I was younger, I was thinking, well, what if I became orphaned? So I wasn't even thinking about widowhood. I wasn't even thinking about my husband dying, because that wasn't even in the realm of my imagination, that I would get married young and my husband would die 7 years later and I'd be widowed. It wasn't even what was in the realm of my thinking was my parents might die and I would need to be prepared because I'm an only child. So I embraced that from a very early age and was financially independent even before. So like the lessons passing on, it was just like, well, you know what? I had learned these lessons even before. Here's this article passing on these lessons to you as a way of saying, well, you know what, be prepared because you never know what will happen in life.
That's true. Yeah. It's a tricky balance though, to give people advice or prepare our children or even prepare ourselves for those types of scenarios as rare as they might be. And then also not get to a place where you're living in fear constantly of something like that happening. Yeah. I mean, I've thought a few times when I see how much we pay for life insurance, I'm like, but do we really need this? Yeah. What are the chances? But oh my gosh. Yeah. It's a slippery slope. I'm also, okay. So here's something that I hear from a decent amount of women that are in my communities that either come to my retreats or send me DMs on Instagram, is when we're talking about money, a common thing that I hear from them is that they ignore their financial issues, like, even as something as simple as looking at their bank account. So they might not be in a financial predicament, but they just don't want to look at it. Or, they're paying the minimum on their credit cards and just kind of, it's like in the background there. And it's not necessarily that these women don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. It's that they have resistance to it. And again, it's not that they're in dire straits with their money. It's just they don't want to look at it. So what kind of advice do you give to those women? So if they were come to you for coaching, like where would you start?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I coach women too with my work at the Institute, and we just launched this trauma of money certification program. And I've been coaching women through that program. And it's funny, Andrea, that you bring up this avoidance, right? And disassociation when it comes to money. And it can be a sign. It can be a sign and I'm not saying that it stems from trauma in all cases, but it is just saying it's a symptom of money trauma. It is. Those are a couple of the symptoms, and it might not be that it's money trauma, but I always tell women, go back, just go back and think about your childhood. Were there any negative money messages being passed on to you? Andrea, you brought up point when you were younger too, and thinking about your own money story. And I always tell them, write that money story, like write a letter to yourself and say exactly where this stemmed from, what were people around you saying about money, and how were these early perceptions formed? Was it as a result of negative money messages? Was it a result of any money trauma? Were your parents always, talking about money in a negative way, or were they fighting about money? It's so important that, we do the work in thinking about why is it I'm avoiding my bank statements? Why is it that I'm avoiding the debt, the credit card statements? Why am I, not checking in? Why am I not wanting to go in on a daily basis, maybe multiple times a day, to see what's coming out of my bank account? Why am I not setting up an app that tells me when a deduction is out, immediately notifying me which deduction came out? Because it's important that we do the work. I get women, telling me various stories, but it's such interesting and important work because we can transform that. We can write a new money story. We can develop a new relationship with money, and it can become fulfilling and empowering and fun for women, to the point where we feel happier, better in terms of our overall financial wellness. So I would start there and just start thinking about that early childhood interaction and kind of what happened there.
I love that foundational where I did it a long time ago, but now hearing you say I'm like, I should probably do that again. And I have no idea how you feel about this. And I don't think I've seen it in any of your blog posts or on social media. So I'm just gonna throw it out there. If you think it's like Yahoo weird stuff, then we can just bypass. But I've had a handful of therapists come on and talk about intergenerational trauma. And I've heard some, it's kind of like arguing going on social media about, the good old days, and people used to stay married longer. And the argument there is, well, women they were in many marriages trapped for economic reasons. Like they couldn't leave. I think about my own mother, and she divorced my older brother and sister's father. They're my half siblings. And she got married very, very young. She's a teenager, had children right away, and left that marriage in the mid 1960s when and they were Catholic. That was like unheard of. And really the only reason she was able to do that, and her former husband did not help her ever, with financially, ever. My mom had 7 sisters. So she had this built-in community of women who helped her with childcare so my mom could get a job. And she struggled a lot, but I think about that she had some opportunity having the help that she did. And a lot of women didn't have that, and they stay. Anyway, I'm going on and kind of like painting the picture and of intergenerational trauma when it comes to money, especially. What are your feelings about that? And do you work with that at all?
I do. And I wrote this article about ancestral money blocks being passed down, and, even on the Holistic Wealth podcast, we've explored the topic quite a bit in terms of, epigenetics and how, this trauma gets passed down even in the womb. But, what you're talking about, the scenario with your mom is I feel like it's the story of all of us. It's not the same in terms of every little detail, but I do feel like, and you're right, I feel like back in the day, women, those marriages last, of course, because women weren't as financially empowered as they are today for so many reasons. And
Correct.
It's so obvious, right? But like I've heard so many stories, Andrea, of people who've come on a podcast, other women, and they've talked about like their grandmothers living through the Holocaust, or their great grandmothers living through World War II,
the Depression,
the Great Depression. My grandmother did, my mother did. And so the stories are so similar. And we've come so far that I think as women today, we're so much more self-aware. yes, like I do a lot of work around that coaching and at the institute. And so a lot of women also have identified to me, and even on the podcast, that they had to break that they had to break that generational pattern themselves. And they've had to turn kind of that money story, on its head, and chart a new path for themselves. And it's amazing that I think as women that we're so self-aware now that we can be like, well, you know what, that was a generational pattern for sure. But here's how I'm going to rewrite my money story and be authentic in embracing my financial identity and crafting a new money story for myself. And so many women have done that. And it's amazing that the first step, as we're saying, is just, looking back at our lineage, looking back at the line and kind of what our grandmothers and our mothers went through and kind of what we need to do to kind of, carry the baton going forward for the next generation.
Yes. I'm curious about kind of switching gears slightly. I know that your book came out several years ago and then you updated it because of COVID and the pandemic. Was there anything specific that you updated the book with the coaching that you did from women that had experienced some financial losses and maybe some trauma through the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did, and I did update the book with several women who I've trained, coached. It also has a foreword by actress Kelly Rutherford, who spoke about her own story of setback, which is just unbelievable. As a mother, having to go through, the loss of her kids through divorce and that ongoing battle, right? So it's a very vulnerable, this new and expanded book is a very vulnerable one. And as you mentioned, several women came forward after the first edition of the book was written, and they're like, well, we want to be certified holistic wealth consultants. And at the time I had no courses. I had nothing like that. And I wrote the certification program through COVID, the first 6 months, and launched the certification. And several women, we've had women, become certified and have started training other women in their communities, teens, Girl Guides, through Girls Guides associations and through multiple organizations. And many of them have said that this has been revolutionary in their lives, as they also make other women aware, because they have come through. I mean, all of them have revisited their own personal money stories, and they've come through what we just mentioned in terms of that, intergenerational trauma. I remember there's one story in the book of one of the trained holistic wealth consultants who lived through homelessness in her childhood. Like, they lost their home and they were homeless on the streets. Now she has a 7-figure business and she's doing extremely well, with her investments. And she came forward and she's like, I want to be a holistic wealth consultant. And we have several stories like that, both in the book, women who have really taken the reins in their lives of turning things around. And you can't imagine being homeless, or you can't imagine walking through periods of great turmoil, and then really taking the reins in your life to turn that ship around and craft a new story. And that's what they've done. And it's phenomenal. And that's why I wanted to show readers the progression of how it started, how the journey started, and what's happening today in terms of how it's evolved. And there are new chapters in the book as well. The personal financial identity piece is a whole new chapter in the book, as well as several other new chapters. And of course, the most important piece for me is, well, how do we craft a holistic wealth portfolio? And that's a new chapter in the book as well, because now it's synthesizing everything for readers in terms of, okay, so what's the end result here? What am I left with? And it means, part of that means building that holistic wealth portfolio and really, building out a life for yourself that encompasses this, holistically wealthier lifestyle. And so that's why I'm excited. So thanks for asking me about that, Andrea. I'm excited about, this new edition that was just published in March this year, that really shows readers, how women have taken the reins in their lives, regardless of homelessness, regardless of abuse, regardless of tragedy, and they've really turned their lives around.
I have have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. I love the idea of an entire, like a holistic portfolio that's not just about your finances, but because everybody loves a good chart too. I mean, that's like my favorite thing when I look at with our financial advisor. Right. And sometimes I'm not saying it's always like right on track to make as much money as we want when we retire, et cetera, et cetera. We have to make adjustments sometimes, but so is life. Like you don't always have everything is a 10, all areas of your life are a 10, which actually brings me to something I just wanted to comment on. And I wrote about this in Make Some Noise, my last book and it was specifically about finances. And one of the best things I ever did, and I liked our former financial advisor just fine, and it was a man, but we moved states. And so I decided to hire a new one. And I specifically looked for a woman. It was for a couple of reasons. I just felt more comfortable asking questions to a woman. And also a woman can relate to my apprehension and my discomfort of not knowing certain things and not knowing the difference between this kind of IRA and this kind of investment and all of this lingo and this jargon that I had no idea. And I finally realized, and this is going to sound really dumb to some people, but I finally realized one day as I was uncomfortable, asking questions with our other financial advisor, this is literally their job. Yeah. Like it's literally their job to educate their clients on what all of these different things mean. Yes. What all of these different accounts means, what all these different investments mean, asking like, should we put more money in our savings first? Or should we pay off this debt? Or should we invest this money? Like I kind of came to these conversations previously thinking like, I should just already know that. It's sort of like signing up for dance lessons and then being like, well, I don't know how to dance yet though. Yeah. What's like the point? But I just want to say that because I know that there's probably someone listening who's a little bit nervous about it. And I also still talk to women who are even my age and like, they're like, no, I don't have a financial advisor yet. And then I'm going to put the link in the show notes to my financial advisor. You guys, her name is Joanne. I specifically asked her and I'm like, you don't just work with people in North Carolina, do you? She's like, oh, no. I have clients all over the United States. And I do think she is limited to here in the United States. I know, Keisha, you're in Canada, but I don't get any commission from her. I don't get any kickbacks, but she is so fantastic. She's progressive, like all of us listening. She's amazing and I love her. And she's a woman. And then the second thing, and then I'll stop talking. I wanted my children to see a woman in that field.
Absolutely.
Because it is a male dominated field. And I just wanted them to be like, oh, our parents' financial advisor is a woman.
Absolutely. And this is such an important point for you to raise, Andrea, because many of the women who came forward who wanted to become certified holistic wealth consultants are women, 100%. And they're financial advisors, mainly financial advisors with CPAs, with MBAs. Some of them live in the United States. So I have half and half of my holistic wealth certified holistic wealth consultants, half and half live in the United States. And the other half are in Canada. And I just wanted to bring up a stat. And I searched it while you were speaking because it's unbelievable that in the industry, only 15 to 20% of all financial advisors are women. You know, it's so funny you raised that point that you had that male financial advisor. And you're absolutely right. A lot of women don't feel comfortable with their financial advisors. Sometimes, you know, they're just not sensitized to our needs in the way we need them to. As a mom, I've experienced it. I experienced it when I was widowed early. And it was just mind blowing at sometimes the insensitivity, right?
I want to acknowledge too that especially, and I'm assuming the vast majority of them are white too. And for you as a woman of color, I imagine that it was even an extra layer of feeling uncomfortable with your choices out there.
Absolutely. And that's why even in that certified holistic wealth consultant program, there's a whole module on anti-racism. There's a whole module on how to deal with clients that are women of color or people of color, because it's absolutely not the same. We face different barriers. They're systemic barriers. They're not easy to overcome. And, you know, as you've seen with the George Floyd protests and that racial reckoning that we had, it's huge. And it's a huge part. It impacts our finances in a huge way. So how do we make those clients more resilient financially? And that's what I've been working on, even in my work, because I realized that the gaps were huge. When these women came forward, Andrea, they're trained financial advisors already in the field. Most of the women who take my program are trained financial advisors. And they came forward and they're like, listen, we're not even scratching the surface. Because you know what happens in the financial industry? So financial advisors will come forward and they're like, yeah, buy a life insurance, buy a mutual fund. And that's it. Like there is no coherence to your portfolio. There's no big long-term goal. There's no big thing tying everything together. And they said, listen, your book taught us a lot in terms of what the gaps were, because many financial advisors, for instance, just one glaring example, many financial advisors have never even receive the proceeds of a life insurance policy. I have. So I know what it means behind the scenes and the process that has to unfold and how to help your clients.
I imagine,
and how emotional and how traumatic it can be and how it can lead to money trauma. And that's what I teach in my money trauma course too. And so a lot of these women come forward because they know their training is limited. They know they're limited in scope in terms of what they can offer, but they want to go deeper with their clients because there's the changing role of the financial advisor as well with COVID-19 and people looking for far more support. So that's another thing that, is so important about this conversation.
Well, I'm glad that we got to dive into that at the very end here, and we will definitely put those links in the show notes so people will have plenty of options and opportunity to look into a financial advisor, whether they're thinking about hiring one for the first time or switching because they're not totally happy with. I look at a financial advisor similarly to the relationship I have with a therapist. You have to completely and unequivocally trust this person. It's an emotional relationship, even though you're not emotional with each other, if that makes sense. Because money, I think for most people, is emotional. It's not just money.
Absolutely.
Like it is, but it isn't.
Absolutely. And I have my own financial advisor. And
that's smart. I wouldn't think that you would.
And I've had one from, I was like maybe 20. Like I always, and so even, with my last response, I want to make it clear to listeners that it's not like I'm not for it. Like, you have to have your financial advisor. Mine is on speed dial because he knows the ins and outs of, for instance, taxes that I don't know, right? And he knows the ins and outs of what's being announced that's going to affect my portfolio in a way that I'm not tracking. So I think you need a whole ecosystem of experts around you when it comes to your finances. And absolutely, absolutely everyone needs to get one. But I agree, Andrea. Get one that suits you, that you feel comfortable with, that you trust, that you can level with, that you can be you can be honest about your emotional responses to certain things, like, a particular investment or stocks or whatever it is, so that you feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I also just want to say one last thing about it. It's not just for quote unquote wealthy people, or if you're listening thinking like, well, I don't make over six figures. I feel like people who have financial advisors, it's only for people who make over six figures. Not true. Absolutely not true. We had one, me and my former husband. Oh my gosh. And we were broke. We were in our 20s. Like, we didn't make hardly any money. We were just starting out in our careers. If that, I was still in college. Like, yeah, it's still an important thing to have. So before we close, I want to make sure that is there anything else that you want to say that maybe you missed or that you want to circle back to so that you can feel complete before we end?
No, I think I'm good.
You feel good?
Yes.
Okay. Where can people find more of you? We will put links for sure to the things that you mentioned on the show. We'll put those in the show notes, but you have your own podcast, right?
I do.
Or anything else you want to send people to?
I do have my own podcast. It's the Holistic Wealth Podcast with Keisha Blair, just because I think there is more than one Holistic Wealth podcast. So I just want to make that clear. And of course, my personal website is keishablair.com. Feel free to reach out to me there. And there's the Institute's website, which is instituteonholisticwealth.com. And of course, if people want to subscribe to the podcast, that would be great. And it's available on all streaming platforms, on Apple and Spotify and Stitcher and everywhere. So you can also listen in there, to those episodes as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It was amazing being here. I really enjoyed our conversation, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you've been a pleasure first thing in the morning. And to all my listeners, you know how grateful I am for your time and that you choose to spend it here with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes. AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.